I thought it would be a good idea for us to review the two essays that I asked you to read this week, since you do have assignment one due by the end of the week, and you do need to have some background information that you can use in that essay. And I think these 4 or 5 essays that we have read over the last 3 weeks now should be very helpful to you in constructing a personal essay on this topic. So let's start with Kenneth Goldsmith's essay, Go Ahead, Waste Time on the Internet. I suppose that his title leaves no doubt about where he stands on whether the internet is a good, well, maybe it does. I mean, he says waste time tongue in cheek, because immediately he tells us that we're not wasting time whenever we're on the internet. Sometimes we are, but not all the time. It's interesting to look at the structure of this essay because, for the most part, Goldsmith organizes his essay as a series of counter-arguments. That is, he breaks down the arguments that critics of the internet make, and he responds to them. For example, the claim is the internet is making us stupid. He says, well, no, it's not. It's making us antisocial and shallow. And he says, no, it's not. So we're looking at that primarily to see how the writer respond to an argument. It's part of this whole they say, I say, and this is a perfect example of how an argument like that can be structured. He never loses sight of his thesis, of the fact that he is a believer in the value of the internet. I want to also spend a little bit more time talking about Shirley Turkle. You read an interview with her in the Atlantic magazine, but I was not able to provide you with an actual excerpt from her book, which is very helpful, I think, in understanding her argument. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about an excerpt that I have previously used in class called No Need to Call. And that also is a title that tells us a lot. You know, when I was a younger man, the stereotype of teenagers was that you could not get them off the phone. They always wanted to be on the phone. Now, when I say phone here, I'm talking about telephone. I'm not talking about cell phone. I'm talking about having audio conversations with their friends. And as I say, that stereotype of teenagers were they went to their rooms and you didn't see them again for days because they were on the phone. We know that happens today, but they're not talking to their friends, or at least they're not verbally or orally, I should say, talking to their friends. And this, Shirley Turkle suggests, is a bit of a problem. Turkle structures her excerpt from her essay as a series of interviews, really, with mostly, but not all, younger people. One of the people she interviews is named Elaine. And Elaine talks about how screen communication, that is text messaging and some of the other platforms that are used, screen communication, Elaine says, is a place to hide. It's a way to hide your true self. Turkle notes that it's interesting that people who use screen communication often find it liberating, as if it were providing them with increased privacy to say what they really feel, even though we know that the internet is far from private and that things that are said there can last forever. Turkle describes Elaine's attitude toward writing in a general way as, at the screen, you have the chance to write yourself into the person you want to be. Now think about that for a minute. Essentially what Turkle is saying is that young people are using the internet as ways of constructing what essentially are false personae. They're not real. They might be what you want to be, but you're not truly reflecting who you are. And Turkle sees that as problematic. Turkle says it's a seductive but dangerous habit. Many people today are saying calls are too complicated. Young people, again, not all young people, but and not only young people, but for the most part, Turkle's focus is on young people. They say calling is too complicated. It's too uncomfortable. They don't want to be spontaneous. People today want to be efficient, and that applies to adults as well as younger people. But efficiency has its price, as she points out in her interview with Tara, who is an attorney. And Tara says, I'm at the point where I'm processing my friends. Well, doesn't that sound sort of a little bit dehumanizing, to be processed? In other words, you're just an item to be checked off on a checklist. She says, I'm at the point where I'm processing my friends as though they were items of inventory or clients. Audrey, again, who is a teenager, Audrey is a teenager who has two parents who are divorced, and she talks about how her parents will instant message her with a message to convey to the other parent. She says, my parents use me and my cell like instant messenger. Audrey, frankly, is one of the interviews that kind of shocks me, sets me back on my heels a little bit when I think about it. Because Audrey says she doesn't want to talk on the phone. She would rather text because I have more control over the conversation. In other words, every feature of personality has to be polished before it can be shared. So it somewhat destroys the spontaneity, which provides at least some of the fun, I would think, of the interaction between human beings. Perhaps an even more extreme example is a young girl named Meredith, who was informed of the death of one of her friends by text message. I used to tell my students that they didn't need a phone because if Grandpa died and their parents wanted to inform them of that, the worst way to do it would be to call you on your cell phone in the middle of class. Although I understand there are some parents who have done things pretty close to that. But Meredith says she preferred hearing about it by text message. And the reason she said that is I didn't have to be upset in front of someone else. Now, that's a human response in one way. In another way, it is rather troubling, because where is the opportunity to grieve? Only in private? People who have undergone a loss often need support, and that's something that other people can offer. But she says later, when she texted and communicated with others about the friend's death, it was, yeah, it's sad, and then they moved on. So it's kind of a way of putting your emotions at a distance. If you talk about social distancing, this is not in a physical sense. This is social distancing in a real sense, in an emotional sense, I should say. Another example is Trey. Trey's brother announced that his wife was pregnant via his blog, which he added to every day. And Trey was kind of offended by this. He thinks, why couldn't he call me and let me know? He just tells me at the same time he tells the rest of the world. And he says, I was mad at him. He didn't see why I was making a big deal. Do you think I'm old school? Well, yes, Trey, I do kind of think you're old school, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't know that we should share the most intimate details of our lives via social media. the Kardashians aside. So Turkle points out that we do this. She talks about how Trey defended his use of the blog, but as you can see, Turkle thinks that we have lost something here. So again, I think I've said this earlier in your. I hope that your essay, personal essay on technology, will kind of reflect your thinking and how it has changed, perhaps, not necessarily change your point of view, but just maybe change some aspect of your thinking, or even given you greater understanding and evidence for the position that you first outlined. Anyway, I wish you good luck. This is the last week that we're going to be talking about technology and communication per se. And next week we're going to move on to another interesting topic. So again, I wish you all the best of luck in writing assignment 1.